To me, the stories, of course, you shared are generally, very tragic and illustrate all the points you're making. But there's one story which, to me, seems in a rather different category, which is the one about the man from Afghanistan who was paying a woman for sex. Now, we have laws against that. And was the man simply naive? He didn't know he was breaking the law? He didn't know the nature of this woman's business? I mean, it seems to me the story here is his naivete as much as her, as her cruelty.
Here's how I'm going to look at this. He viewed it. Let me backtrack on this. There are these arrangements that people get into. They're typically called the sugar daddy relationship.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not speaking for these people, but my understanding is that they don't really view it the same way that the traditional prostitution structure views it as. The way they both view it is, hey, I'm just coming over to hang out, and I'm helping out a young person. And that's the way both of them viewed it. For the purposes of describing the story, my request was that we sort of just think past that, because they were both consenting legal adults.
Yeah, but even prostitution is still against the law. Yes, it is.
Not anymore. Now,
Okay, but I mean, if the man did not realize the nature of what he was doing, and the nature of her and how she conducted herself, and it was clear by the end of the story she was a very different person than he thought she was, which means she did a great job, pretending to be someone she was not, and he was naive enough to be fooled. There's still something wrong with this story. This is not. I don't think this story is of the same nature as the other stories he told, where with families and children and.
His mental intent was, I'm helping out a young person. That's his mental intent. That's how he viewed it.
Well, he was naive.
Would it make any difference if I took away the cash portion there and I just told the story the way it was without the cash involved?
Well, the cash was very important in the story because she kept raising the price, and eventually she threatened him to gain the possession of the value of the home. So I think cash is central to the story.
Yes.
What's interesting is, I think you've hit on a theme that covers each of Ray's stories, and then are moving a little bit off it. But to me, the central theme of every one of those stories was the naivety that you just referred to. It wasn't the situation that this particular guy was naive with this particular woman, but rather in almost all of the situations, with all due respect, in almost all of the situations where a husband goes back to the wife after there's a peace bond, there's naivety. It's the same naivety. Now, the difference in the particular situation here that you're drawing attention to is that she was bargaining openly and honestly for the advantage that he was getting. In all of the other situations, I'm married, I've been married over 50 years, so I'm happy with my arrangement. But lots of other people who have not been married, or been married 50 years and are not happy, But very often a husband goes back because he's paying, this isn't even a husband, this is a person, but in these examples, the husband goes back because he's paying the price for ongoing tranquility, or for ongoing peace, or for ongoing continuation of status quo because the change is too heavy. So if you take that story of this guy who was paying for sex and shift it to every other one of the stories, who was paying one way or the other for companionship. I mean, going back, I want to see my kids, I go back to the wife, I want to go back to but that's the same companionship, only the price is done at the exchange is done somewhat differently. So the question that comes to my mind when I heard every one of these stories, including that one, I had the same reaction. But I had that reaction with respect to all of the stories. The question I asked when I acted for these people, I was like that lawyer who said to the guy in jail, what the hell are you doing? And the bigger question to me always is, at what stage of the game are each of those guys that you're speaking of living in a fantasy, which the guy was paying for sex was? How many of those guys are living in a fantasy that they want to preserve, that isn't there if they're being honest, that destines them to get into trouble? Because every single one of those stories involves somebody who is going to raise the price. This woman was raising the price because she was being open, honest, and it was financial. Everybody else raises the price. I want a new car, I need new clothes, we got to go on a vacation, you have to whatever. And eventually life is miserable. And if you fast forward 96.7% of those stories, if you fast forward another 5-10 years, they've split up. And the one thing that the guy in those situations is saying is, what took me so long to realize what this was about? The anchor is the children. But that's just, not just, but that's the anchor that keeps them in the relationship that they're naively thinking is going to work out.
I'll also be honest, I knew that part would be somewhat provocative, and I struggled for some time as to how to convey the story, but I wanted it to be real. I also think the focus I wanted to make was how easy it was to drop what I refer to as the nuclear bomb, which is, you don't sell your house, buddy. I'm gonna call the cops.
You gotta pay
Yes.
for your wife, you pay for your girlfriend, one way
so
or another.
basically,
You know,
I work
it's
with
simple as that.
men who are
Paying
newly
for it is
released
catch.
from prison,
Okay.
and a lot of them are in this situation.
Right.
So how do they go about getting this type of like assistance, like when they get out? Because a lot of them, well, what I do particularly is help them find housing and like emergency shelter, but they want to connect with their family again. They want to connect with their wives. They want to connect with their kids, and we just like need somewhere to send them.
They want to be in the area where their family is.
Yeah,
They can't
exactly. And they can't. They have restrictions. They have all kinds of things that prevents them from making that connection. Even like just a basic thing, like they don't know what to say or they don't know how to go back. Like, how do I find them? Like, how do I connect with here? Do they just come here for drop-ins? Do they just come in to talk to somebody? Do they have to pay for representation? Do they have to? How do I bridge that sort of? Yeah.
Are you talking about what we do here at
Yeah,
Cafe?
a cafe. Like, how do I send them?
They can call up customer, you can call up the number. They can come in on Monday evenings for the Legal Resource Center. There's other
support on Tuesday nights.
exactly. There's other services that we're offering. I think the core issue also is there's no one real solution to all these problems, and this is what Cafe is trying to raise awareness for right now. That so many of these men will come back out into the system, and it's done. It's moved on. Life's moved on. Children have moved on. At this point in time, commencing or looking back at the family law proceedings that were started, they don't even know where to begin, right? But we here at Cafe say, come on in, speak to us, see what we can do. We can put you in touch with people. There's something that we can do to help out. Robert?
Let me just say that there's directly to your point about what can we do. We're just starting a project dealing with legal aid. I've talked to a couple of people here about it, but maybe everybody should hear about it. Legal Aid Ontario funds domestic violence causes. They support programs to teach people about it. They support programs around it. They support access to justice. They support legal counseling and legal representation, all of those things. They do it from a model that says women have to be believed in all circumstances and men are always perpetrators. Men don't deserve help. So the men that you're talking about are number one victims probably of a legal aid system that has worked against them, and on the second side, they aren't given the benefits that legal aid was set up to do. So the reason I'm saying this to you in a public way is that Legal Aid Ontario is now starting a strategic long-term plan on how to deal with domestic violence issues. And if you talk to them and say, men have to be included in that strategy, everybody talks to them, talks to their MPP about how legal aid can best address that issue and direct the resources, I think some men would be helpful.
Thanks, Robert. Victor?
Do you think it's about time to consider parental alienation and also address the form of domestic violence? And second, do you think it's about time to create a national registry for parental alienation? This might be the
That's a great question, Victor. I think many here, at least at the Centre, would view parental alienation as being child abuse. This is my view. I'm starting to notice some courts are starting to recognize it. It would be nice to see the definition of child abuse be expanded to include parental alienation.
mental abuse.
So, I'm sorry?
Or mental abuse. Psychological abuse.
Well,
Have a child here at the same time.
I've looked at some of the United Nations conventions, such as the one on children, where they have a very broad, expansive definition of what child abuse is. And it includes mental violence, psychological, even witnessing the parents fighting. I don't know to what extent that's been incorporated here, but it's certainly a effective point to bring up. I would hope that one day parental alienation would be included in the definition of child abuse, and I really hope that Children's Aid Society would take it more seriously. In many of the situations with the men that came here, and in my own professional experience, they've often mentioned that Children's Aid Society will openly say, well, parental alienation is not something we deal with. Yes?
Have you ever heard of a case where it was proven in court?
There's a couple. There's a couple.
Wow.
$200,000 in legal expenses.
First of all, this is off the top of my head, there was a recent article, I think, in the Toronto Star. And then just a few weeks ago, I was doing some quick case law research, and I found a few cases that are recent. In my opinion, the ones where the fathers were successful, they had to go above and beyond to demonstrate that this was parental alienation. They had secured expert child psychologists that they were probably paying an incredible amount of money to come and testify. And this was something that took place over years. And in those cases, I noticed that the fathers were successful.
Was there any repercussions towards the spouse of the father?
I think there was the one in the Toronto Star. I think they took custody away from her. I can't remember. One man's shaking his head. Is that what
I
happened?
think so, yeah.
I
But
know
again,
there's one from the United Kingdom. There's actually quite a few from there where they took custody away. The one in the Toronto Star, it escapes me.
There was a case in Hamilton. There was a case in Hamilton where they put the There was a case in Hamilton where they put the mother in jail.
Good. How long ago?
What was that? Maybe it was 5 years
So it
ago.
would have been a few years ago. There was a decision from Justice Pazeras. But again, factual circumstances in every single situation differs. With that particular case that Joel just mentioned, they had a 50-50 working arrangement. And she was doing everything she could with young kids to try to make difficult fathers contact. And based on the facts there, they had a Section 30 assessment done and a recommendation was made that if her behavior didn't cease, which it didn't, then they would alter the custodial arrangements, which they did.
Right.
But they're very fact-driven. They're so fact-driven
And expensive.
and costly.
Yeah. A lot of the guys.
Did you get have her charged with something for that?
Oh yeah.
Charged.
No.
There's no criminal code section for child abuse.
There was another one. Sorry, Joel.
No, go
Elizabeth
ahead.
Paul, Joel and I worked together. There was another decision too, and I think this was really the start of the concept of parental alienation. I believe it was in Kitchener, where they ended up sending father and the children to a program in the United States to do reconciliation counseling. But again, you're dealing with very, very unique situations. It's not the norm. It's not the norm. So for so many circumstances where there is parental alienation. You've got, 1% where it's given the attention that it deserves.
Yeah, it's
By the courts.
absolutely. It's difficult to assess because, I mean, you don't know whether the kid's legitimately just not wanting to go to the dad for a particular reason, or if it's parental alienation.
Okay, and then tied to that, I'm sorry, I'm going to be taking
No,
over,
no,
is
go
also
ahead.
the ages of the children. The ages of the kids is really also, goes in hand with your comment.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with younger children, it's a very different outlook than when you're dealing with teenagers.
Except about 5 months ago, the Supreme Court gave orders to children who 17, the last
see.
17, the last 2 years. We have to go to counseling for 2 years after they.
Okay,
There's
yeah.
a comment at the back.
Yeah, I actually, I think those parental alienation cases that went through the courts, they're not geared for the average person. The people that won in those cases spent hundreds of thousands
Yes,
of dollars. I can't do that.
Yeah.
No one in my neighborhood could do that. I know there are some people in East Oakville, I live in Oakville, that may be able to afford that. You can't afford that. They're spending, I looked into getting an assessor for myself, it's $40,000 or something like that. I tape recorded my ex-wife telling my son to run away from my home, lie to the police, and say I was hitting him. I have that evidence. I have it on tape. What happened was, I had a case conference before a judge. I presented this in the case conference to the judge, and I said, this is a criminal offense. I've read the criminal code. I want her charged. And I said, I have countless examples after this. And the judge said, I'm not going to do any of that, sir. No court is. At that point, I quit. Okay, because you quit. If the courts are telling me that, I don't think you can get justice. And another thing, before this happened, what happened is I got a court order. I was raising my children 50-50. My ex-wife didn't like that. I had them sleeping at my house 155 days over the course of the year. Not quite 50. And it was 155. They had their own bedrooms. I took them to school. I did everything, all those things. What happened then, she started phoning the police, and she would say there are court orders, she just didn't have an example of them. So the police would come to my house constantly and say, sir, you need to hand the children over now. I said, I have my court order. It says, no, she says she has another one. This is from 3 years ago.
Let me just jump in for 1 second. I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
A lot of the gentlemen that have come in here, and I'm thinking of Elizabeth, who's a lawyer, and Joel as well. I don't know if your experiences are the same, but many of the men will start off with sometimes a lawyer.
Yeah.
Then they can't afford it.
So anyway,
Right?
what ended up?
What happens is they end up self-represented,
Yeah.
facing a system where they are very nervous and experienced counsel on the other side. Again, my opinion, but in many situations where they were the sole breadwinner, the spouse has a legal aid lawyer, and the legal aid lawyer will continue to press the case forward, but the gentleman can't. I found that when men are typically paying the lawyer on an hourly basis, they're more likely to want to come to a amicable resolution. Whereas on sometimes a legal aid retainer, it's almost like there's incentive, just keep pushing forward. I don't have to pay the bill, but I understand your frustration.
Yeah,
There was a comment over here. I was just gonna get
really
to as
quick.
well.
What ended up happening was I spoke with the inspector of the police department. I presented all my court orders. He said, you won't have any more problems from us, sir, which was very kind. However, he warned me. Well, he didn't warn me. The staff sergeant then warned me, said, now that you can't use the police, you're going to be getting calls from the CAS. And you know what? I did.
I appreciate
That's what
you
happened.
for sharing your
So,
story.
and this stuff still goes on. It's in the Oakville Beaver. There is $165,000 grant so that men can go around to the schools now and tell other, 19-year-olds or whatever, how bad men are, and we have to change our ways. It's in the paper.
Scan it.
Yeah, I'll scan it, but this
There's
is
a
in the
comment
paper.
over here.
I'll-
Another comment, a question, and I'm glad that you point out the other lawyers in the room. And this is my question that I would like to get some light on. They said, please don't put the camera on me. I don't like it. They said that when you go to family court, it's in the best interest of the child. You point out stories, and each one in this room and outside of this room, the police, the judge, they all know the horror stories. Okay? How does going in front of a judge and having parents attacking each other is the most vile, corrupt ideas that they can conjure up in your mind is the benefit of the child? First question. The second question, how does litigating, is it that the right word, litigating? Family issues in front of a court, who knows nothing, who takes nothing into the relationship of people, okay? Because we're dealing with relationships, likes, dislikes, culture, protocol, all these things. How is that a benefit to the family, or is it part of the destruction of the family, going to court and litigating? Is there a better way of resolving human conflict? Because it also deals with criminal law. And criminal law says if you kill a man, you're found guilty, we all agree what is the crime. This is human relationship. How can we codify human relationship into some sort of, which they are doing it indirectly, some sort of a penal system that is mostly penalizing the men from a lawyer perspective that is dealing with these things every day. I am just a victim. Like Malcolm X says, Plymouth Rock fall on me. I didn't fall on Plymouth Rock.
I appreciate your sharing. I noticed a lot of questions, so I don't know which one exactly
You pick your
want me to.
pick your
I
battles.
agree with your first one. There's an incredible amount of toxicity in the family court system. I agree with your second comment, is what I'm going to say, that how does a third-party arbitrator, a judge, decide what's best? I mean, that judge wasn't there in the home. The judge doesn't know. I think judges increasingly are themselves finding themselves in difficult positions, because you have two people coming forward and making allegations against each other. They often don't know either. The concern, though, is that despite them not knowing, an overwhelming number of mothers end up gaining custody, right? So if you have one specific crystal question, I can try to answer it.
Third question.
Yeah.
Since we are dealing with high conflict,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be the best interest of a judge if the couples have a prenuptial based upon the goals of the relationship that they can determine their judgment on?
Right.
No, I'm just asking.
It's nice to think that way.
No,
but
I'm
not a
just
lawyer.
asking. I'm
It never
asking the
works in
lawyers in the room because I
These
know
wacky
nothing about the law.
situations, common sense goes out the window.
And things change. Change the circumstances.
No, but I'm asking from a a litigation point of view, right? Because, like I say, criminal law, they said if you do this, this is the crime.
Without getting into all the specifics of it, I mean, first off, a prenup is something you would have before you enter into the relationship. I mean, a lot of people still don't do that. When these situations happen, it's psychologically so taxing. I think people really lose their senses. And I'm talking here about whether it's a woman that's faced domestic violence or a man.
Is it something that we are taught, perceive, or something that is maintained through to, how shall I say, through the ages or through history of time?
I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that. Yeah. Somebody else had a comment?
I have a question.
Yeah.
For those who are related with the complaints or are dealing with conflicts in their communities, and the communities that they are seeking support with are dealing with family issues, are supposed to be helping individuals and their families.
Yeah.
What happens when someone doesn't know anything about this clinic and needs to file a complaint with human rights? How can this clinic, can you talk about how this clinic helps individuals with their human rights complaints?
Sure. Here at the Monday Night Legal Resource Center, first of all, it's a work in progress is how I describe it. Second of all, just given the nature of the way it's set up, we have a number of men come in, we're in a group environment. We can't always necessarily give one-on-one legal advice per se. So what we try our best to do is help unrepresented people find resources, give them some tips, give them some ideas on how they can handle their own case. It's very difficult in the 2-hour period that we have to be able to give one-on-one legal advice to everybody because, and I'm speaking for myself, normally if I meet a client, I'm going to spend a good hour and a half or 2 with them in the initial client interview. So here at the clinic at the moment, given the number of lawyers that we have, and we're hoping we're going to have more, join us, hopefully, is that we're going to have more people with us to be able to help out and facilitate.
In general, when people are dealing, I've dealt with human rights complaints in the past, but it was more related to employment. Now it's more related to community and family issues. Where do people go for help in general with these kind of complaint forms and their procedures?
You mean overall help in general?
Yes, because I always hear that people say you should go to human rights, you should fill out an application, but I don't hear about who helps the individual in this process.
Well, one thing that we're trying to raise awareness for here at Cafe is that, and I'm going to pick the example of men who might be facing criminal charges, is that there needs to be a support system now in place for men as well. And I'm speaking now for the men that are wrongfully charged and for the ones that are charged through the regular track. That there needs to be some sort of assistance from them. And I know one of the lawyers that volunteers here pointed us to a recent provision where it seems the government might be looking at options on how to help men in those situations.
I've always heard that people who actually carry on with human rights complaints are also a minority group. Not every person can put themselves in that kind of pressure. It gets too demanding on them, and I understand it's because there's not a lot of support.
Thanks for your comment. We had another one up here.
Very quick question. Do you find, from your experience, that police specifically target minorities, or is it just part of the culture? What do you think?
So, here's a little bit of personal information about me. I've lived here my whole life, born here. I can say that in the early 70s and 80s, there was more discrimination towards people of different ethnic backgrounds. I will commend law enforcement on this, where they, I believe, have actively sought out more recruits that represent the Greater Toronto Area. That being said, I do still find that many men from specific ethnic backgrounds are targeted. And I'm primarily up in the Brampton Court. Take a trip up to Brampton Court any day, okay? And
is it part of police culture, or is it part of training?
I can't speak for what police training is like or what their police culture overall is like. I can say that there has been a difference with the recruitment of more police officers that represent the population. Now, whether that reflects when they show up at a house and they see a husband and wife in an assault situation, if they respond with some favoritism to the wife. From what I hear from the men that come in here, they'll say, yeah. They'll say, I called the cops and they showed up and arrested me. Joel,
Yes,
you got something to say?
No, I was just going to say that most often these charges arise because of calls initiated by the wife. So it's not so much the police are targeting, it's who's calling the police that they're responding. you made the other comment, that is that when they show up, the question is, will they be more harsh in a minority situation than otherwise? And I don't have an observation. I haven't noticed anything significant there. I think it's much more who's calling
Yeah.
and how they're responding.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah. Yes.
Have been solved. Call the police or
Well, I don't know, because given from what I've told you this evening, when you call the cops, they're going to arrest you, right? I can tell you that I have seen in the criminal work that I've done myself and that colleagues have done, that some law enforcement are now starting to press charges against a violent spouse that is a wife or a girlfriend. I can't recommend that you go and see a lawyer. I mean, I don't know. It depends on the circumstances. I mean, are you looking to separate? But it's certainly a good idea at that point to try to protect yourself, right? And many of these men in these situations where they have experienced domestic violence, it's interesting. I've noticed that the symptoms they suffer from are identical to women where they go back. I want to see my kids. I want to give my marriage another shot. So they end up going back, and they'll often view as some of the aggressive behavior as a one-time thing. But calling the police, certainly a good idea, but then, as I mentioned, from some of the stories you heard here tonight, I don't know. Right?
Will you speak up, Nate? Can't hear you.
I didn't know this was something that's needed.
Okay.
So we can keep also discuss.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming. Thank you so much.
Question.
I just wanted to make one more question.
Yeah.
I went there because I was sent there by my agency going to our previous conference. But I came, I think it was a brain center. Because to the health organization.
Okay.
They put it on. I was so surprised when I walked in there. I worked with Khalil for 10 years. And I walked in there, I was like, there was only one table, I think it was Cat was there.
Yes.
Anyway, I went there to get you guys some information, and there was nothing. I was so surprised that there was I'm not sure, it was a shelter that was boycotting the
You were
table.
protesting this.
I was so taken back by it, you know, I felt we were on the same team kind of thing. We were all trying to help you, and we were,
Yeah.
solid for this thing.
Thanks for coming up. Thank you so much for coming out. Maybe one more question, Jess?
One more question,
I
please.
feel like Nixon up here with JFK when they had that debate and he was really hot.
One more
Right?
question.
One more question?
Yeah.
Comment and follow up.
Comment and a question.
I'm going to make a comment and follow up.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're doing. I've had contact with Talent Gold in the past and have joined with the false memories syndrome foundation for false accusations of psychiatry, bad psychiatry. Part of the formula, which really you haven't addressed, is that if it weren't for lawyers, you would need lawyers. Sometimes the other side, it seems that there's a presumption of guilt, which is the first obstacle to overcome. How the hell do you prove you did not do so? And there are lawyers out there who are making all kinds of money, sucking money out of the government through various programs, so-called support, that don't exist for men until we are bankrupt by the process. And so I wonder if my comments, are they still appropriate today? Is there still the presumption of guilt? Is there still scumbag lawyers out there who don't care about the truth? You know, are we still up against that kind of brick wall that is so defeating?
Your comment about lawyers comes up often on Mondays. Here's what I'll say. in every profession there'll be people that will do things that aren't cool, and in every profession there'll be people that will do things that are cool. Okay, meaning there's lawyers out there that are great, that will try to help out their clients. I know a lot of family law lawyers and criminal lawyers who really care about their clients. They're thinking about them in the evenings, they're thinking about them on the weekends, they're thinking about them to such an extent where it causes them to have breakdowns. And then of course there's lots of them out there that are going to say, you know what, sorry buddy, you can't see your kids, you want to see them, give me another 10 grand. And that's how I think there'll be bad mechanics, there'll be good mechanics, there'll be good accountants, there'll be bad accountants.
Is that environment still as I described it?
I would say no.
Presumption of guilt and lawyers defending women who just put up a brick wall and make it absolutely impossible for us to negotiate, to mediate, to just, there's no way that you can deal with the situation.
Lawyers have their own ethical obligations that we have to comply with. We have to stand with our client, no matter what they've done. And we have to give them the best advice. So if it's a lawyer who's representing a female litigant who is applying tactics that are not necessarily nice, we might advise them and say, hey look, this could come back and bite you. But our job is to represent them. I'm going to go back and mention though that there are lawyers out there that are doing fantastic work. I'm so happy to see 2 here this evening. I'm so happy with the lawyers that we have at Cafe. I mean, we have 10 already almost that are devoting their own time to this cause.
Alan Gold is still involved in that kind of work. He was with ADWEC, the Association of Defense, the wrongly convicted.
Yeah, I haven't seen what he's done in the last few years. One more comment?
One question.
One question? Oh, well, let's have one here then. And then yeah. Okay, and then...
Okay, let's have a vote. Who wants more questions?
I think one question that I think is in the news where also in the workplace affect men too.
Let's go to this young lady over here.
So my comment was just in relation to what you had said earlier about the effect of the situation on the children, right? So I'm not a lawyer. I just want to speak on being a product of like divorce, right? Basically, one of the things that I found helped the children, which was me the most, and I think that they should make it an element of going through family court or that situation at all, was mediation in the first place. I find that specifically in minority communities, they don't offer that as an option for you. You have to do a PAR program, and then, like, whatever happens to the women, the children, they go and someone contacts them from the PAR program or something like that. Right, but if there was an option of mediation initially upon arrest of, you know what I mean, the husband or the father or whatever, it would help to, the stress, especially for the children, you know what I mean, because that helps, it really does, especially for fathers who take an active participating role in the children's life.
These days the courts turn to case conferences where the judges try to resolve the cases before it even goes to trial. But I still find that the judges side with the woman rather than with the man.
Yeah, I totally take what you're saying into consideration. We had a comment up here from this gentleman.
Yeah, one last question.
One last question? We'll have one, and then this gentleman in the black shirt didn't get a chance, so we'll give him the last word. Okay, go ahead, Victor.
Many agencies are beginning to reach out to the family court, especially mothers and women, many of them. Is there any chance for counsel to reach out and establish some kind of partnership with the family court, with the family law industry, with the establishment, the family law establishment, here in Toronto specifically, maybe not now, maybe in the future? Is there any plan, maybe this is something to do with strategy?
Our hope is to be able to do that.
I mean, we can have some kind of partnership, cooperation, understanding, raising awareness, and exchange of information that would really for the benefit of the society.
We definitely would like something like that would happen in the future. I think that Justin, Robert are actively, the two of you are always working on those types of projects. I'm hoping in the future that we have something like that. Thank you. And then the final comment over there with the man in the black shirt.
Yes, I was basically just going to say that what I've experienced with my own case is I found that, you know what, I've dealt with the police. She's thrown everything at me, from the police, the CAS, and all that stuff. All that stuff is fine. But my biggest hurdle, my biggest problem was when I actually go in front of the court and I have to deal with a judge. And it's the judge who is the one who is, I wouldn't say acting fair, and the judge is the one who is not acting in a manner that I would consider to be a judicial practice or of jurisprudence. It's a system where, especially as myself as a minority, I feel that I'm prejudiced going in already. And then on top of that, I have to deal with other prejudices that are also keeping me held back in order to move forward. And I want to be an active parent, and I want to be in an active role with our daughter and be a part of her life. But I'm having this problem where it's not so much the police, it's not even the CAS, it's the actual court, the judge. So what is this person supposed to do? What do they do when they feel that their own rights are being suppressed by the judiciary?
How do we hold the
How do we
judiciary
hold the
accountable?
judiciary accountable?
Make up flyers.
When men attend on the Monday evening sessions and they're self-represented, sometimes I'll ask them questions that I think are almost secondary to me, but I'll say, did you wear a tie when you went to court? Sometimes men will say, I got all this audio and the judge won't listen to me, and I got it right on my phone. And I'll say, of course he's not, or she's not going to listen to it. You got to have it transcribed. You got to put her in a book format. So sometimes
But
it's
even
just,
if you come in with all of that
if you come with all of it, right?
Yeah.
Then I don't know. Okay? Because sometimes I don't think I'm going out on a limb here when I'm saying that the court system itself is overwhelmed. There are so many matters on a docket list these days. In some jurisdictions, they have judges coming in from other jurisdictions. So sometimes that can be a factor as well. But in regards to your question of where you feel as they're just giving the mom all the benefit of the doubt, well, that's kind of what Cafe has been trying to say for the last little while as well. Andrew, you had something to say?
No.
So,
Something to say for that.
is that it?
I think we've had
That's good?
okay. Plugged out.
I feel like Nixon when it was the JFK.
8:54.
You look a lot better. So with that, can we thank Rehan for proving what an asset you are to what we're doing here on the board of organization, as well as the legal clinic that you offer. So I'll just say some very quick concluding remarks because it is getting late. If you haven't signed up yet, if you enjoyed this event, if you want to come to our regular monthly series, please do sign up. If you're interested in this particular program, make a note on the sheet or come and see me. Also grab a brochure. You'll learn more about this program and all the programs that we do. It's not just the legal aid. We also do peer support, therapy, fathering, etc. And we're also starting to put in place a program, this has come up a couple of times, for male victims of violence, trauma, and abuse. So we're making actually a lot of progress, meeting with shelters, meeting with police, domestic violence units, meeting with politicians and city councilors, and putting all the pieces in place. And that's coming in. So you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks, very likely. So definitely grab one of these or check out the website, menandfamilies.org, menandfamilies.org. All of these ideas that we've heard and the stuff that we're working on is great, but we need help to do it. We need financial help, we need volunteers, we need people, registering and coming to the programs so that we can offer you the resources that we're starting to make available. So please take advantage of that and please help us to make this all happen. And you can talk to me about how to get involved. Thanks, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a donation bowl near the door. Appreciate that.